How to end your suffering. When I was depressed, when I would have those really, really dark days, I felt so lost. I was lost. I felt alone. I didn't have the words to articulate to my husband or even to my friends of the state that I was in. And it was a really, really scary thing for me because I didn't know if I can get out of it. And one of the things that I noticed is that it was getting darker and darker. And depression is not something that just magically goes away. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do something. And that's when I became obsessed with learning about the mind and mental health. And I'm reading all the psychology books and meeting with counselors and just really learning about what it is that they teach to create healing. And I liked what they taught, but I felt like I was just getting to like that peace level and I wanted something a little bit more. And so I started studying what they do on the East, like in India and yoga and teachings that they've been teaching for, tens of thousands of years. And they teach the science of joy, the science of happiness. And I'm like, yes, sign me up. And one of the most beautiful things, and I promise you, I think this saying or this, lesson that I was taught is one of the things that really changed my life and had a huge impact on me is to no longer identify with my mind. I don't identify with my mind anymore. And at first I was like, I don't understand. How do you not identify with your mind? And like, what are you? If you're not your mind, what else is there? Like, I didn't even understand that concept. And I didn't see any of that in any of these, psychology books and textbooks and like all of that stuff. And I'm like, what does it mean to not identify with the mind? Because then I'm learning like, okay, so if I'm not the mind, I'm not any like I couldn't quite get it in my American brain and how we are trained. But what I learned is that I am not the mind. I am so much greater than the mind. I am not the school I went to. I am not my grades. I am not, where I sit in society or how much money that I make. I am not, all these labels that we put on ourselves. And what really helped me understand it was a way that a teacher I was listening to, he helped me understand, like, what does it mean to not identify with my mind? Because I can't lie, I struggle with that. I'm like, what does that mean? And so I'm going to break it down to you of how he explained it to me. If somebody came up to me and said, who are you? The first thing that I'm going to say is Megan Johnson. And that response might be, okay, so you're just some sounds and some letters and some shapes. Did you have a name or nickname when you were a child? Sure. I was Maggie Poo. And they're like, okay, so when people called you Maggie Poo, were you any less of who you were? No. Or even when you got married and your name changed from Megan Roberts to Megan Johnson, are you more of who you are or less of who you are? No, I'm still me. And that made me realize, okay, so great, I'm not my name. Then they asked, well, who are you? And at the time I was practicing and I'm a lawyer. Oh, you're a lawyer. So before you had your law degree, before you passed the bar, before you went to law school, were you less than? Or were you still you within? And I thought to myself, well, no, I'm still me, law degree or not, I'm still me. And so the response is, well, you are not a lawyer. And I'm like, okay, well then who are you? I say a mother. Okay, before you had children, were you any less than who you are right now? And I say, no, I'm still me. Okay, so you're not your name. You're not what you do. You're not a mom. Well, then who are you? And it really makes you start to realize, okay, so you start peeling off these labels and getting like, okay, well, I'm not this and I'm not this. And it helped me understand the reason why people lose themselves when, let's say, somebody breaks up with them or they can no longer play basketball because they injured themselves. The reason or They also, people that have a lot of money, they lose that money. The reason why those people lose themselves is because they identified with those things. Like, I don't know who I am if I'm not, with Sean. Or I don't know who I am if I'm broke. Or I don't know who I am if I don't play ball. I've been playing since I was a child. Like, that's who I am. And the reason why people lose themselves is because they identify. They believe those things are them. And I even see that a lot with the pressures that parents put on with children with grades. This is why kids feel so stressed out at school, because their parents are like, you need to come home with these A's. And if they come home, God forbid, with a B, then they have identified with that and think to themselves, I am less than, because I didn't either meet my parents' expectations or I didn't get that A, because an A means I am somebody. If I make a certain amount of money, that means I am somebody. And so you start taking off those labels. That's where some of the healing starts to happen, where you can't lose yourself if you're not attached to those things. So then the teacher said, okay, so you're not your name, you're not your what you do as a living, you're not, a mom, that's not just you. Now you have the experience of being a mother. You've had the experience of being a lawyer. It's just not who you are. And then, he'd say, okay, so now let's imagine that you are listening to your favorite song. Who is listening to the song? Are you the song? No. If you're listening to a song, you're not the song. You're the listener of the song. Or if you're looking outside and you see a tree, you're not the tree. You are the viewer of the tree. So now let's say you are standing in front of a mirror, you are butt naked, and you are looking at your body, all the beautifulness of your body. Are you the body? Because you just said you weren't the tree, you're the viewer of the tree. Now, are you the body? Or let's fast forward and you're 90 years old and you're looking in front of the mirror. Now your body is a little bit shorter. Everything's all crinkled up and wrinkled and all of that stuff. And you're looking at yourself. Are you still you? The body has changed. But are you still you? And that's just something that got me thinking a little bit, like, yeah, just because I'm 90 doesn't make me less of me, of who's in here. Or let's say that I'm back at my age and somebody chops off a leg. Now here I am with one leg. Or no, they chop off two legs. Am I still me? And I still, who I am within? Of course. Or they chop off my arms and my torso and I'm hooked up to all these machines and I'm just a neck right now and a head. I've lost most of my body. But am I still me? Am I still in there? Of course. So I have that body back, everything's back to normal. The point, you are not the body. And if you are not the body, you are not anything that arises from the body. And if you are not anything that arises from the body, you are not the mind. And if you are not the mind, you are not anything that arises from the mind. And if you are not anything that arises from the mind, you are not your thoughts and emotions. You have thoughts, you have emotions, but they are not you. And the moment that I realize this, that these are something that I just have, these depressed moments, this is an experience that I am having, but it is not me. That is where I started to gain power and control over that experience. So one of the things that I teach people to do right away when I first meet a client is that I show them that if they want to no longer suffer anymore, they have to learn to create a separation between who they really are and the mind. I kind of compare it, well, not kind of, I compare this to like COVID-19. When the coronavirus became rampant, what's the number one thing that the government all told you to do? Social distancing or physical distancing. They wanted everybody to be 6 feet apart. And the reason for that is because if you were physically distant from each other, you were less likely to get sick. You would stay healthy. Well, I tell people, do that to the mind. Create distance between you and the mind. And the more distance that you have between who you really are, that consciousness and the mind, the healthier and happier and more control you will have over your life. I tell you guys, when I was suffering from my depression and learning to no longer identify with the mind and separating who I really am from the mind, that is when I started healing. It was creating a little bit of distance and taking off all of those labels that I had been identifying with, and I thought that that was me. That is when I started healing. So just treat the mind like it's a virus. Create just a little bit of distance from it and start to look at it. I tell people just to become a witness to the mind. And becoming a witness is just looking at it. It's not getting lost in it. It's not judging. It's not criticizing your thoughts or how you feel. It's just looking at it, observing it. Become a bystander of the mind. You're aware that, crazy is happening or some stuff is happening. The mind is saying some stuff, but it's not really you. That's why you're not going to really hear my mind unless it's like a teaching moment in this. I usually say the mind, or like the mind is having a moment. The mind is having a headache, where I start to just kind of distance myself from it. And because I'm not attached to the mind, because I don't identify the mind, it doesn't have any power over me. Yes, I may have some emotional moments happening. And yes, I have those intrusive thoughts, those mean things that the mind says. But because I have distanced myself from the mind, because I look at the mind, it no longer has power over me. Now, I got to be candid and honest that separation process from you and the mind, it's going to feel like a divorce. The longer that you've been married to somebody, the harder a divorce is going to be. You've lived with this person your entire life, and it can be difficult. But when a relationship becomes toxic, you have to divorce. This is why I tell people you need to divorce the mind. If your mind is being cruel, if it's saying you're not enough, you're ugly, you can't ever trust anybody, you're always going to be alone, you're always going to be broke, or you have anxiety attacks or depression or whatever it is that you are going through. If you are in a toxic relationship with your mind, you have to divorce the mind. You have to create some separation between you and the mind. The thing about divorce is that it can be respectful and amicable, or a divorce can be awful and difficult. To have an easier separation between you and the mind, I have a couple tactics, a couple tools that you can use just to make the divorce, more respectful, because the mind's going to fight. You've been with the mind for however old you are. It's very ingrained in what it is and what it says to you and how it treats you and all of that stuff. And so there's some tools that you can do to make that divorce a little bit easier, to create that separation between you, who you really are, and the mind. One of the things that you can do to start creating that separation between you and the mind is practicing gratitude. You hear a lot of people talking about how important it is to be grateful for what you have. A lot of people don't have that, but there's a lot of beautiful things that happen within you when you actually practice gratitude. With science improving so much, scientists are actually seeing what gratitude does within the body. And one of the things that I teach in another episode is when you think a certain way, whatever thought it is, positive, negative, whatever it is, your body releases chemicals within you, hormones within you that align with that thought that you're having. So that's why, if you're having happy thoughts and, gracious thoughts or whatever it is, you feel good. It's because your body is literally releasing those chemicals. But if you have angry thoughts, resentful thoughts, anxious thoughts, depressed thoughts, you are going to feel that way because the body is releasing it. This is the power of gratitude, because doctors have found when you are grateful, your body releases dopamine, releases serotonin. Those are the happy feelings. And there's a Harvard neurologist named Jill Bolt Taylor. And one of the things that she found is when you have an emotional experience and those chemicals are dropping, they only last for 90 seconds in your body. And if you continually have like an emotional loop after those 90 seconds, that is your choice. I'm going to say this again. This scientist found that when you have an emotion, you have an experience of something or a thought, those chemicals only stay in your body for 90 seconds. So you feeling down, if you can just kind of learn how to allow those emotions to run through you, 90 seconds, it's a minute and a half. The problem is that we perpetuate it. We have that emotion and then the thoughts start going and then the thoughts release more chemicals and it becomes this dangerous cycle. And so if you can start replacing those painful thoughts when you start to go into, some kind of episode or whatever it is that's going on in your life, one of the things that I'd say to myself a lot is, like, why are you here? You're just a waste of space. You're not enough, or all these terrible things. I would then replace that thought with something that I am grateful for. And by doing that, I will release chemicals that will make me feel better. So guys, this is not just some like psychology stuff, like be grateful, you'll do better, you'll feel better and all of that stuff. Your body actually responds to those thoughts that you create. So be mindful. You can't always control the thoughts that are happening in your brain. I get that. But you can create thoughts. So when you start to have those moments, you create them. And you don't even have to have some kind of dark episode or, going through something. If you practice being grateful throughout the day, the brain gets wired to think that way. The brain is it's a computer program. Whatever it is that you choose to think, it's going to build on that. So if you consciously become more grateful, you are going to release those happy chemicals in your body, and you can have that control over how you think and how you feel. And the more that you practice being grateful, the longer you can stay in that pleasant state. The brain, these emotions, what you think, this is a muscle, and you can build that gratitude muscle. The brain is always monitoring the body. And if you are grateful, I don't care if it's for your dog, your kids, having breath right now, knowing that you're going to eat a meal, whatever it is that you are grateful for, if you can stay in that state, those chemicals, the serotonins, the dopamines will be released. The brain is always monitoring and regulating what's going on in the body. And if it picks up on these happy chemicals, it's going to start having happy thoughts. It's a cycle. And so you can control how you feel. You just have to be willing to put in some of that effort. This is what's taking care of yourself. This is what self-care looks like. It's something so simple. It doesn't have to be such a complicated thing. Learn to be just a little more grateful for whatever it is in your life. And these later episodes, if you take a look, I'm going to be giving you more tools and tactics on things to make that separation process a little bit easier for you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I hope that it was helpful for you, and I will see you next time. Bye.